your run-of-the-mill family hatchback, Citroen's much improved second-generation C4 aims to offer a more relevant choice in the closely fought Focus Class C segment. Refinement and comfort get prioritised over on-the-limit handling, while value pricing and super low running costs get the nod over fashionable trendiness and cutting-edge electronics. The biggest changes with this updated model lie in its rejuvenated engine range, with impressive PureTech petrol and Blue HDI diesel units offering class-leading power and efficiency that put this car back into class contention.
Thinking of buying a Focus Class family hatchback? Well, you won't need telling that there's a huge selection of models from which you can choose. If you're sifting through them, then it's very likely you've not seriously considered this car, Citroen's much improved Mark II model C4. In this film, we'll be exploring why perhaps it might be worth a place on your shopping list. Let's start with a statistic that might surprise you. The average age of Focus Class family hatchback buyers is 57. Of course, there are plenty of younger people driving around in models of this kind, but they're mainly company drivers with little say in their choice of vehicle. Those who go out and spend their own money on cars within what is often Britain's best-selling market segment are mature people. Not the kind you'd think who'd want to corner on their door handles. Not that you would know that from the way that motoring magazines and TV ads tell us that performance and handling are all that really matters in this sector. They're wrong, of course. Style, quality, space, equipment, low running costs and safety are the more sensible virtues that real-world family hatchback buyers really care about. All the things, in fact, that seem to have been prioritised here. Citroen's advantage in this segment lies with the fact that its mainstream models, cars like this C4, don't have to be especially sporty. Buyers who do want that are provided for by the parent company PSA Group's more avant-garde DS brand, and in this case its comparably sized DS4 range. That was why this Mark II C4 was first introduced in 2010 without the requirement for sporty three-door or hot hatch versions. And little need for so many of the futuristic styling flourishes that Citroen now thinks may have put some older people off the previous model line. Instead, this second-generation C4 was launched as a car relentlessly on message for the real-world preferences of potential buyers in its target market, a model sympathising with their eco-friendliness, easing their credit crunch running cost burdens, and offering a beautifully built package that's versatile enough to make many feel that something Mondeo-sized from the next class up would be willfully extravagant. It all sounds a sensible enough proposition on paper, and one that perhaps would have initially worked in practice if, back in 2011, this C4 had been able to offer buyers the brand's latest super-efficient PureTech and Blue HDI Euro 6 engine technology, and to do so with value pricing. Sadly for Citroen, without that, there really wasn't enough to set this car apart in its crowded market segment, particularly with rival budget brand models undercutting C4 pricing. Hence the need for a rejuvenated second-generation C4 lineup, with all of its Euro 6 engine boxes ticked, the car that we're going to look at here. It may not have the sophisticated underpinnings of its Peugeot 308 cousin, but it offers all the same efficiency standards, and with more affordable pricing as part of the deal. There's also a smarter look than the original version of this design could offer, plus extra equipment and plenty of what Citroen calls creative technologie. Is it all enough to pitch this car back into contention in this sector? Let's find out. So what do you look for in a car of this kind? Dynamic handling, pin-sharp cornering precision, suspension in which you can feel every nuance of the road surface as you drive and adapt yourself accordingly. If these are your priorities, then I would stop viewing right now if I were you. move right along and get yourself a motoring magazine that'll probably tell you to buy a Ford Focus in this segment. A car with less equipment, a 25% smaller boot, running costs that'll be about 10% higher, and an asking price that in direct like-for-like model comparisons could be around 20% higher. But hey, Focus is better to corner on its door handles, so that makes up for all that, doesn't it? If you think it doesn't, then stay with me and let's take an extended drive in this improved second generation C4. Is this the dullard that the specialist press have painted it to be? Or, as Citroen suggests, merely a model with its priorities very firmly in the right place? Your answer to that question will, of course, depend on your priorities. And if these focus on comfort and refinement, then you might be tempted into agreeing with the French brand that this car's worthy of a little extra attention. Let's start with the comfort aspect. We're not alone in bemoaning the fact that, for reasons of cost and complexity, small Citroens no longer feature the kind of sophisticated magic carpet hydropneumatic suspension systems that they once did. There's unfortunately nothing very novel about the torsion beam rear axle underpinnings of this one, nor, because it's an older design, does it benefit from the PSA Group's latest lighter and stiffer EMP2 platform, the one used by its more modern cousin, Peugeot's 308. Still, the Citroen engineers have done their best to imbue the ingredients they did have with as much of a double chevron feel as possible. Hence the kind of comfortable, absorbent, low-speed ride you tend to expect from the brand. Less impressive is the ride at higher speeds. Pressing on over bumpy secondary roads and undulating major routes can rob the car of the composure it would have had Citroen provided the kind of sophisticated Hydractive 3 Plus suspension setup that it fits to its larger and largely unloved C5 model, a system that floats you on spheres filled by oil and nitrogen. That would have been nice, but probably would have diluted the value pricing that gives this car such a showroom advantage over many of its rivals. Easier for Citroen's development team to deliver within tight cost constraints was exemplary refinement, which the company says was benchmarked against larger, more expensive cars. It's a claim that seems entirely plausible behind the wheel, a place in which downsizers will feel quite at home. Great care has been taken to deaden noise intrusion and deliver class-leading levels of quiet. The French designers even having gone as far as installing an acoustic laminated windscreen with a layer of damping film. The installation of a completely fresh range of engines helps in this regard too. The PSA Group's Euro 6 PureTech petrol and Blue HDI diesel technology entirely replacing the ageing petrol VTI and diesel EHDI units this second generation C4 model was originally launched with. Low mileage folk need to inspect the turbocharged PureTech petrol units first, both small but punchy, just 3 cylinders and 1.2 litres in size, but delivering all the performance and pulling power that you would normally expect from a 1.6. You get a choice of either 110 brake horsepower or, as in this case, 130 brake horsepower outputs. Either way, a great engine's provided, one that develops nearly all of the grunt just where you need it, way down low in the rev range, with a turbo kicking in nice and early to give plenty of usable power. The sprint from rest to 62 miles an hour occupies a very acceptably rapid 10.9 seconds in the 110 brake horsepower variant, en route to 114 miles an hour. On paper, there's not much to be gained by paying the extra for the 130 brake horsepower model I'm trying here. For those figures improve only very marginally to 10.8 seconds and 124 miles an hour. In practice, though, the difference seems more pronounced than that, as torque rises from 205 to 230 newton meters with the 130 variant, so you get more pulling power through the gears, plus the provision of a rather notchy 6-speed gearbox to replace the lesser model's 5-speed item. The other possible advantage of selecting the pokier PureTech derivative is that it gives you the option of choosing extra-cost EAT6 automatic transmission. This setup is clever in that it exacts virtually no penalty in efficiency, but like the previous model's EGS system, it's still frustrating in the way it delivers jerky progress until you learn to lift off between ratio changes. You can get this auto option on a diesel-powered Blue HDI C4 model too, but only if you go for the mid-range 120 brake horsepower version of the 1.6-litre four-cylinder engine used across the lineup. Mind you, this variant could well represent the sweet spot of C4 motoring, at least in 6-speed manual form anyway, combining near 80 miles per gallon combined cycle economy with willing acceleration that sees 62 miles an hour come and go in 10.6 seconds en route to 122 miles an hour. And there's little to be lost by opting for the lesser Blue HDI 100 unit with its 5-speed gearbox. Here, the 62 miles an hour sprint takes 11.5 seconds on the way to 111 miles an hour. But there is a bit to be gained by choosing the top Blue HDI 150 variant, which improves those figures to 8.8 seconds and 128 miles an hour. If those figures really matter to you, then to be frank, there isn't really any version of this Citroen that's going to suit you. As I said earlier, C4 motoring isn't about how fast you can go. Those not appreciating that up front will quickly be appraised of the fact the first time they experience the rather vague steering response and the slightly higher than normal standards of body roll this model delivers at speed through tight corners. To be fair, the engineers have made a few efforts to keep the dynamic behaviour of this car up to standard. The ITC Intelligent Traction Control System, for example, that on particularly slippery surfaces transfers drive force to the wheel with the best grip. On the whole, though, Citroen has delegated the pursuit of cutting-edge handling to its sister DS brand. Is that a problem? Well, as I've been suggesting, for the right kind of buyer, I'm not sure it is. Settle down in this car and its driving manners may start to grow on you. Here's a quieter, more relaxed and arguably more sensible approach to family hatchback motoring. You might actually really like it. Citroen claims the styling of this improved second-generation C4 model to be fresher and more assertive. It's certainly neat and contemporary, though it may disappoint those who expect a Citroen to look as if it's arrived from 20 years into the future. That is for the DS line to deliver. This car's shape remains evolutionary rather than revolutionary, with few changes made over the original 2010 model, a car that managed to be longer and wider, but no heavier than its predecessor. The improvements that have been made are subtle and, as usual with facelifted models, centre mainly on the front end, where below the clamshell bonnet, revised headlights feature 3D effect chrome-finished modules and LED light strips to suit the prevailing trend. These flank the usual neat double chevron badged chromed grille, with further chrome trimming a lower air intake and the housings for the front fog lights that you get on plusher models, like this one. Moving to the side reveals a profile characterised by these slightly unusual overlapping upper character lines. The higher one flowing back from the front wheel arch over the front door handle before a rear crease takes over, bisecting the rear door handle on its way back towards the rear lamp cluster. There's also chromed lower window trim to mark out plusher variants, and this lower door swage line to give the flanks some shape. At the back, the updates remain of the blink and you'll miss them variety, with the addition of a chromed strip down below and 3D effect tail lights for a more distinctive illuminated nighttime signature. Otherwise, things are much as they were, which in terms of practicality is a very good thing, given that raising the tailgate reveals a substantial 408-litre cargo area. That level of capacity remains pretty near class leading, around 25% more than you get in a Ford Focus, and a total bettered only in this segment by this model's Peugeot 308 PSA Group cousin, a car that uses the French conglomerate's lighter, stiffer EMP2 platform. These are underpinnings that simply can't be engineered into this much older design. As is unfortunately now commonplace in this sector, buyers must choose between having under boot floor storage space or paying extra for a spare wheel. Still, at least a modicum of loading bay flexibility is provided by a rear bench ski hatch that opens to admit longer items. And most models get a lovely touch, a removable, rechargeable boot-mounted torch. If you need more space, then pushing forward the 60/40 split folding backrest reveals quite a step in the loading bay, but also a pretty decent level of space, 1,183 litres of fresh air, which is just as well, as there's no option of the kind of estate body style that most rivals offer to folk wanting more room than that. Does the large boot compromise space for rear seat passengers? Not significantly. You enter through wide door apertures that offer easy access. And find yourself inside, seated on a slightly raised rear bench that provides just about enough space for 3 adults on short to medium length journeys, assuming that they're on talking terms, and comfortable room for 2, who'll have plenty of head, shoulder and leg room on longer trips. There's a generous 1.45 metres of elbow room too, and a particularly airy feel if you've opted for this huge glass panoramic roof, 1.3 square metres in size. Those fortunate enough to sit behind the front passenger can enjoy extra foot space, thanks to a front dashboard design that should enable the front seat to be pushed further forward than usual. Time to take a seat up front, where the sweeping single-piece dashboard and a smart centre console look sufficiently of the moment to disguise the age of this design. It does without the latest generation colour touchscreen that you would find on more modern PSA Group models. Not only that Peugeot 308 that I just mentioned, but also this car's small crossover showroom stablemate, a car that Citroen badges as the C4 Cactus, even though actually it's based on the underpinnings of their smaller C3. Still, the lack of that more advanced infotainment technology means that the heating and the ventilation controls haven't been relocated to the touchscreen, so you can still use these proper dials and switches rather than having to jab away at the touchscreen, which, as far as we're concerned, is a very, very good thing. One ventilation feature we especially like is the rest option that you get on the air conditioning, which on hot days can keep the car cool for up to 8 minutes after you leave it, say to dash to the newsagents to buy a paper. Neat. As you can see, this C4 does now have an infotainment touchscreen, or at least it does if you pay extra for it, or opt for the priciest level of trim that I'm trying here. The older tech 7-inch display is smaller than one you'll find in a 308, but it does most of the same things, though with more dated graphics, delivering stereo, phone and informational functions, along with the optional eMyWay satellite navigation setup. What, though, of fabled Citroen interior ingenuity? Remember the odd one-spoke wheel and curious satellite control pods that marked out the old Citroen GS? The flying saucer-style instrument binnacle and fixed steering wheel boss of the first-generation C4? Or perhaps you've seen the sofa-style front seat, the luggage strap door handles and Art Deco glove box lid you get in the brand's current-day C4 Cactus. Unfortunately, there's none of that sort of thing here. Innovation instead limited to less endearing touches, like the blend of digital and analogue instrumentation on the dash, behind which the graphic colours can be altered, and the rather gimmicky way that you can vary the polyphonic tones delivered when the doors or the boot lid remain open, when the seat belts haven't been activated, or when you're using the indicators. Still, at least this car's more conservative approach means that there's little to offend, with strong build quality, soft touch plastics and flashes of bright work that you'll find on the 4-spoke multifunction steering wheel, the air vents and the gear lever. All the kinds of things you'd expect to find in a car of this class, in other words. Plus the option of a de rigueur start-stop button, should you want it. You're positioned quite comfortably too, and though the height-adjustable seats don't cosset your lower back as much as they probably should on longer trips, especially without the lumbar adjustment not included on entry-level trim, they do offer decent side support. Over-the-shoulder visibility is slightly inhibited by the thick rear C-pillars, so the optional blind spot monitoring safety system's worth having, though the small rear quarter-light windows do help here. On to cabin practicality. As often seems to happen with French cars, much of the space in the glove box is occupied by a fuse box. Some compensation for this is provided by the reasonable number of cubbies and storage compartments, 4 in the centre console alone. Go for an EAT6 Auto model and you're better off still, for the space that would normally be needed for the gear stick can instead be used for a deep storage box big enough to swallow and refrigerate up to 4 half-litre bottles. Bigger bottles of up to 1.5 litres fit in the front door bins, plus there's a useful drawer under the front passenger seat too. This C4 sits in much the same £15,000 to £20,000 bracket as most Focus-sized family hatchback models, with the improved second generation version featuring a completely fresh range of the PSA Group's latest petrol and diesel engines beneath the bonnet. Most buyers will be looking at the entry-level 1.2 litre PureTech 110 brake horsepower petrol unit and deciding whether or not it's worth finding the £1,900 premium that Citroen is asking to upgrade to the Blue HDI 100 brake horsepower diesel version. C4 buyers looking for the option of the brand's EAT6 semi-automatic transmission must choose a plusher trim level and one of the more powerful engines, either the Blue HDI 120 unit or the Pokia PureTech 130 power plant that we've been trying here. By that point, though, you're getting up towards the £19,000 to £20,000 bracket. A fairly straightforward 5-door only range then. The lineup these days lacking the 3-door coupe-like body style the first generation C4 model used to offer. There's no estate either, but Citroen does offer a small crossover style model bearing the C4 badge, the C4 Cactus, which uses the same entry-level petrol and diesel engines as are found here and offers a model-for-model saving of around £1,000. That's a futuristically styled car for extroverts only though, and because it's based on the platform of the French brand's more compact 3 Super Mini, it's significantly smaller inside. Of more interest is the way this C4 stacks up to its closest rivals in the family hatchback segment. Primarily perhaps its close PSA Group cousin, Peugeot's 308. The answer is that it compares pretty well. At the time of this updated Mark II C4's model launch, the only 308 variants you could buy with PSA's sophisticated PureTech petrol engines were really quite expensive ones. By offering this technology on lower grade, more affordable C4s, Citroen gave its contender a useful advantage. You'll find the pricing between the two models to be much closer if you're looking at one of the Blue HDI diesels, but choosing a C4 over a directly comparable 308 will still save you between £400 to £600, depending on the variant that you're looking at. Those engines, the modern sophisticated PureTech petrol and Blue HDI diesel units I've been talking about, play a big part in this car's value proposition. Essentially, Citroen's pricing pattern means that you can have the top-class performance and efficiency that these power plants bring for less than the money you'd pay for an equivalent Focus or Astra fitted with an old-tech, thirstier and dirtier unit. A Focus fitted with an engine modern enough to properly compete with the units found in this C4, say a 1-litre EcoBoost petrol or a 1.5-litre TDCi diesel variant, could easily cost you £3,000 or even £4,000 more if you're looking for comparable performance. The same is true if you're comparing against the more modern equivalent engines found in cars like Volkswagen's Golf and Renault's Megane. That's a massive price difference in this part of the market. This C4 also significantly undercuts cars in this class that you might perhaps expect to be cheaper. Models like Seat's Leon, Skoda's Octavia, Hyundai's i30 and Nissan's Pulsar will all cost you around £1,000 to £1,500 more in like-for-like price comparisons. Toyota's Auris and the Kia Ceed get closer in value terms, but they can't match the efficiency or the performance on offer here. Are there other options? Well, not many. Honda's Civic is let down by an inefficient petrol range, and though the much better 1.6-litre diesel version's frugal, it'll cost you around £1,200 more than a comparable C4. The Mazda 3, a model we like, is a £20,000 car in diesel form, though it does make sense in petrol guise, if you can justify its £1,500 price premium. If, having considered all of this, then you conclude that it is a C4 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Citroen has been with the standard spec. Will that affordable pricing be reflected here? Not really. Even the most affordable touch-trimmed variants get the basic features you'd now expect from cars in this segment. Things like air conditioning, a multifunction steering wheel, front electric windows, a height-adjustable driver's seat, a decent quality 6-speaker MP3 stereo CD audio system with an aux-in socket, plus cruise control with a speed limiter to preserve your licence in roadworks or urban areas. There are also halogen headlights that feature trendy LED strips and daytime running lights, as well as lovely 3D effect rear tail lamps, electric mirrors, and a hill start assist system to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. From this point, whether it's worth moving further up the trim hierarchy may depend on the engine that you've chosen. C4 buyers looking at the PureTech 110 petrol unit get saddled with a hefty £2,000 premium to move up from base touch to mid-spec field trim. But if you're looking at a blue HD 100 diesel version, that premium falls to no more than around £600. At field spec level, diesel buyers get the option of finding another £200 for an engine stop and start system that significantly cuts your running costs. And there's the option of getting a diesel C4 with the brand's EAT6 automatic gearbox, although you'll pay a hefty premium for it. All field spec C4s can be identified by their smart chromed side windowsills and feature extra niceties like Bluetooth connectivity for your phone, DAB digital radio with an USB socket, leather trim for the steering wheel and gear stick, lumbar adjustment for the driver's seat, a neat rechargeable torch in the boot, and various elements of extra cabin storage, front seat back pockets, for example. Another advantage of stretching at least to a field spec model and avoiding entry-level trim is that you'll get a much wider choice from the option pack range that Citroen offers with this car. Mind you, it won't be necessary to spend very long considering these if you've pushed the boat out and chosen the top flare trim level that we have here, as this already includes most of what you'd probably like. Items such as front fog lamps with a cornering function, auto headlamps and wipers, 18-inch alloy wheels, and inside, dual-zone air conditioning and a smart set of alloy-drilled pedals. Flare buyers also get the key feature that customers of the lesser trim levels will most want: a 7-inch colour touchscreen infotainment system. All C4 buyers have the choice of upgrading this setup to include the brand's eMyWay satellite navigation system, something that comes already included in the Plus Pack convenience package that also throws in keyless entry and start, front parking sensors and power folding mirrors. Other premium features C4 buyers might want to consider include a huge panoramic glass roof with an electric blind, xenon dual-function directional headlights, metallic or pearlescent paint, and leather seats that can even feature a massaging function. The powerful premium Denon hi-fi sound system would be nice to have too, coming complete as it does with 4 woofers and tweeters, plus a subwoofer in the boot. You can also specify an onboard Wi-Fi system, while if you're one of those nervous type when it comes to car parks, there's a parking gap measurement setup that will help direct you into the tightest spaces. On a more basic level, I would also want the spare wheel that's been fitted here, rather than be stranded by the side of the road with one of those fiddly puncture repair kits that so many manufacturers seem to fob you off with these days. Another key option is Citroen's clever eTouch emergency and assistance system. This offers a button that will connect you through to a 24-hour call centre should you ever need breakdown cover or emergency assistance or information on a huge range of subjects that might be useful to your journey. In an accident, the setup will automatically alert the emergency services, providing them with your car's exact GPS location. That could be a lifesaver. Some of the other key electronic safety features, which are now becoming common options on other cars in this segment, are noticeable by their absence here. The PSA group is introducing things like collision mitigation systems, adaptive cruise control and lane departure warning as part of the latest EMP2 platform that this car predates. Still, C4 buyers do have the option of a blind spot monitoring system that stops you dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car. It's included as part of the Plus Pack convenience package that I was talking about earlier. When it comes to the more common aspects of safety provision, this C4 delivers a decent showing. As is now expected in this class, you get twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus Isofix child seat fastenings and tyre pressure monitoring. There are also the usual electronic aids, including electronic stability control with traction control, and an ABS braking system aided by an emergency braking assistance setup to help in panic stops, which will be advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard warning lights. All of this certainly impressed the specialists at NCAP when they first tested this car, the organisation awarding this Citroen a 5-star rating and an impressive 97% in their safety assist test, which at the time was the highest score achieved for any vehicle of its type. Most facelifted cars feature a fresh engine or two, or if they don't, then a few tweaks to the existing underbonnet oily bits to make them more efficient. With this improved Mark II Model C4 though, Citroen has gone much, much further, completely dispensing with the original power plants first fitted to this car, and instead installing a completely fresh range of Euro 6 compatible PureTech petrol and Blue HDI diesel options that offer real advantages over most rivals. As a result, if the idea of owning a C4 is already starting to appeal, then when it comes to consideration of running costs, that concept should really start to gather momentum. We'll start with the 3-cylinder PureTech petrol variants, since it's here that the biggest gains appear to have been made, with fuel economy improvements of up to 25% over the previous generation Euro 5 VTI power plants. Now that's a big step forward, which the engineers claim has been made possible by limiting the mechanical losses you get beneath the bonnet in any car thanks to friction, these typically accounting for 20% of the power consumed. After a lot of Gallic head scratching, the development team managed to cut those friction levels by up to 30% by adjusting the size of the crankshaft, offsetting the cylinders, and by using a lubricated timing belt. It's thanks both to this and to the 1.2-litre PureTech engine's lighter weight that even without an engine stop and start system, the entry-level 110 brake horsepower petrol C4 variant can deliver 60.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 110 grams per kilometre of CO2. Here we're trying the slightly pokier 130 brake horsepower version of this unit, which gets the stop and start setup as standard to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. As a result, it manages 58.9 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and an even cleaner 107 grams per kilometre of CO2. There's very little downside either in equipping this engine with automatic transmission, a move that in some rivals can push your running costs up by as much as 20 to 30%. Here though, choosing your C4 PureTech petrol model in EAT6 auto form will see your fuel and emission figures change only marginally to 57.6 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 113 grams per kilometre of CO2. And before moving on, I need to offer some perspective here on the fresh standards that PureTech technology has delivered. It's easy to get blinded by the figures, isn't it? Essentially, what you need to know is that a PureTech petrol C4 is as clean and very nearly as frugal as an EHDI diesel model would have been in the original Mark II model lineup. In other words, massive progress has been made. Talking of diesels, big strides forward have been made here too, thanks to the installation of a range of Blue HDI engines that use a clever 3-step after-treatment system to better eliminate the 4 nasty pollutants that diesel units usually put out, namely unburnt hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides and particulates. The first stage sees the unwanted hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide elements converted into harmless water and carbon dioxide. In the second stage, that nasty nitrogen oxide also gets converted into water via a selective catalytic reduction process using a urea and water mixture called AdBlue, although you will need to get that mixture topped up every 12,500 miles. Finally, in the third step, a particulate emissions filter eliminates virtually all particulates at a stroke. The result of all this is industry-leading diesel technology that many manufacturers are struggling to copy and, as you might expect, a class-leading set of running costs. Both the mainstream Blue HDI units used here, the 100 brake horsepower version and the 120 brake horsepower derivative, deliver exactly the same fuel and CO2 returns, 78.5 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 95 grams per kilometre of CO2, with the pokey appearance extra power offset by its additional provision of an engine stop and start system. If you were to pay your Citroen dealer another £200 to add that feature to the base Blue HDI 100 model, your combined cycle fuel figure would improve to 85.6 miles per gallon, and your CO2 return would be enhanced to 86 grams per kilometre. To give you some perspective, this means that such a C4 Blue HDI 100 variant will go 11 miles further on every gallon and put out 12 grams per kilometre less of CO2 than would be possible in the kind of comparable Ford Focus 1.5 TDCi 95 brake horsepower model that will cost you over £1,200 more to buy. We're not here to knock Ford either, the truth being that this C4 enjoys a similar kind of advantage over just about every one of its direct segment rivals, the exception being its cousin, Peugeot's 308, which shares the same technology. It's a pretty compelling argument, and another way for Citroen to make it would be to point out that their C4 Blue HDI 150 diesel performance flagship model can deliver exactly the same fuel and CO2 returns as that feeble Focus model I just mentioned. The Ford, a car with nearly 60% less power. For the record, this means that top-of-the-line diesel C4s can deliver 74.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 98 grams per kilometre of CO2. Incidentally, a Blue HDI 150 C4 can't be ordered with the E86 automatic gearbox I was talking about earlier, but the Blue HDI 120 variant can be. As was the case with petrol power, going for the auto option will have very little impact on your running costs. These rated at 74.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 98 grams per kilometre for the Blue HDI 120 auto model. Ultimately, though, it means that all Blue HDI powered diesel C4s, even those in which you don't need to shift your own gears, will in theory deliver the best part of 1,000 miles from a tank of fuel. And if you use the optional eMyWay satellite navigation system and follow its suggestions for the most fuel-efficient route, such a range should be eminently achievable. What else? Well, residual values after the usual 3-year ownership period tend to end up at around the 30% mark, which is about the kind of level you expect from mainstream rivals from brands like Vauxhall and Ford. It might also interest you to know that this car is 85% recyclable, with 15% of its polymer components made out of green, eco-friendly materials. Finally, let's have a look at insurance groupings. Petrol people will find that a PureTech 110 variant is rated at Group 17, with the 130 brake horsepower version rated at Group 19. Diesel folk get a Group 20 rating for the Blue HDI 100 model, a Group 25 rating for the Blue HDI 120 version, and a Group 29 rating for the Blue HDI 150 range topper. All too often, so-called experts tend to lapse into a sort of shorthand when making car recommendations, and nowhere more so than in the family hatchback class. Here, the accepted wisdom for many years has been to buy a Volkswagen Golf. If you don't want, like, or can't afford one of those, then go for a Ford Focus instead. And just like that, every other contender in this huge market segment is relegated to an also-ran status. It makes no sense. Yes, a Golf is great, but it's also very optimistically priced. Certainly a Focus is good to drive, but it's got a tiny boot and also costs a lot if you want it with a modern engine. You could, in other words, see why most buyers in this sector would need to look beyond those two benchmarks. At something like this C4? Well, yes, very possibly. Here's a car that goes its own way. Willfully unsporty by fashionable measurement, yet ruthlessly efficient at getting the important things right. The huge boot, the class-leading running cost efficiency. It's also well built, decently equipped and impressively refined. And despite all of this, it's one of the most affordable choices you can make in this segment, with pricing able to embarrass makers like Ford, Renault and Vauxhall and undercut all but the very cheapest budget brands. For all that, it's not a model the car magazines will tell you to prioritise in your search for a Focus Class family hatch of this kind. Even so, if you're a typical buyer, it's one that'll probably suit you a lot better than they expect. Try one, and you'll see what I mean.